you can create the best content ever. You can like work super hard on creating the best video ever and have it go viral. That's great. But will they continue to watch you past that one video is up to the way you create that video, right? If it's just the most beautiful video ever, and then that's why people follow you, then they're going to expect other beautiful videos from now on. And that's what's going to keep your brand going. For me, if I can get people to follow based on this story that I'm truly living out in my life, then my job becomes sharing my story and living my life.
When many people hear the term influencer, the first person that jumps into their mind might be one of the Kardashians. But the truth is that today, anyone can create content, and many people are doing just that and making a living doing it.
There are so many different journeys that people take to get there. Some of these happen kind of by accident, when people share the things they love with the world and they wake up one day with an audience who just can't wait to hear more.
But this podcast isn't about how to get rich as a creator.
Instead, this podcast is all about getting started.
Cheers to getting started. Hey everyone, I'm really excited to share a conversation with Katie Zhao. On this podcast, we typically like to focus on the 0 to 1 phase of the creator journey and explore how top creators found their niche. Katie has a really interesting take on this idea, which is that rather than focusing your effort on finding a niche as a creator, you should focus on becoming the niche. It's a fascinating idea that we dive into more in this episode, and I know it's a concept that resonates with a lot of other creators out there, including a previous guest we had on the podcast, Luke Lau, who mentioned it in one of our earlier episodes. What I particularly like about Katie is that she is an extremely thoughtful content creator who, through her content, goes beyond tips and tricks to really get to the heart of what it means to have true engagement, and also has a lot to share in terms of the mindset that you need to succeed and persevere as a creator. It's clear that Katie's playing a long game, and I'm so grateful that she's chosen to build in public and share some of her insights with us. And without further ado, let's get to it. So Katie, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Excited to chat with you and hear a little bit more about your story.
Of course. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So maybe kind of to kick things off, would love to hear like a walkthrough of a day in the life from your perspective.
Sure. A day in my life would probably include a couple meetings here and there. I work with a lot of different companies and individuals on their TikTok branding. So a lot of strategy calls. And then another portion of it is my own content creation. So figuring out what to talk about and then filming and editing and things like that.
Nice.
That's pretty much it.
And I know that you also have been doing a lot of traveling this past year.
Mm-hmm.
How do you fit that in along with the kind of running the content creation business?
Yeah, so I fit it in really well last year, probably 6 months ago. I went to Europe for 6 weeks, and that was super fun. But honestly, fitting in both is pretty hard, and I've been trying to get out there and travel again, but there's definitely a balance that needs to be struck. So it's a work in progress in terms of fitting that in.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I guess I'd love to hear, so you said you went to Europe for 6 weeks. I guess what was the biggest learning experience from that, taking that leap of faith?
Yeah. So for me, going to Europe was kind of like my exploration phase, since I did take a year off of school, and I was like, I want to use this time to explore. But I would say in Europe, one of the biggest things I learned about just traveling in general, I was solo traveling. That was my first time ever traveling on my own for such a long extended period of time, is that yes, it is the location that you're in and all of the adventure that you go on while you're traveling. But what I realized the most was that I loved the perspective that I had as I was traveling, because everything is brand new. Every site that you see is new to you. You have this perspective that you want to romanticize everything. And I think that like feeling of presence is what I'm chasing when I'm chasing traveling, because currently I'm in New York and I was in Grand Central like station a week or two ago, and I was like looking around and I was like, wow, if I was traveling right now, I would have a much different perspective of this place because I would be in more of like an adventure mode. And so now I've been able to kind of translate that into just my normal day-to-day life, that mindset.
Yeah, no, I love that aspect of kind of focusing on the present, and that it is much easier when you're kind of out there experiencing completely new things. But then in your day to day, when it's, you know, becomes more routine, it's hard to kind of cultivate that that awareness. And I mean, I'd be curious, like, is it the memory of the travel that like helps you remind yourself to kind of stay present, or are there other sort of routines or rituals that you've built for yourself to kind of cultivate that practice?
Yeah, I would say it's the memory and also like my reflection of that time, because when you're solo traveling, you're meeting like so many new people every day, and there's this just sense of adventure about it. And I remember I like made a good friend literally at the bus stop just randomly. And what I realize now is like that's not the case of me. It was in London, me being in London, and it's just you meet friends when you're in London. It's much more about like the perspective that you have in the moment of, oh, I'm in a different country, let's make some friends, that you can translate into your day-to-day life. And like basically it's pushed me to like be more open to various experiences day to day instead of like sticking to a routine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And like one of the aspects that I really like and appreciate about your content is that you seem to kind of post like when the inspiration strikes. And I imagine that that is in part like related to kind of presence and like cultivating a presence. And I'd be curious if you agree with that statement. And also, you know, I think maybe a lot of people would think about social media as a way to almost escape from the presence. And so I'd be curious if you have any thoughts there on kind of that balance, and yeah, how you kind of bring that like sense of presence into your content creation.
That is such a good question, and I've actually never thought of that balance before, but now that you bring it up, like I guess I have two things to say. The first is, yeah, I do try and, you know, capture things as inspiration strikes, because I think there's a stronger passion in the moment. And that just like that type of strategy really comes from a self-awareness, constant self-awareness of what you're thinking about, like your thoughts, what can be communicated well to an audience, and how to communicate that naturally. So I think in terms of that, I do have to be very present every day in my own thoughts just to figure out what I am going to post. But on the other side, with the balance and striking that balance, that's something I've been thinking about, because I personally don't like vlogging. Like, no one's telling me I have to vlog, but I would like to be able to show my days, like make videos about my day. But the thing that I don't like about vlogging is how much it takes you out of the present moment when you have to walk around your day thinking about how to capture it and things like that. So I'm actually currently trying to figure out some sort of workflow or some sort of way to vlog and capture things without it fully taking all of the creative energy every day as you live your life. So I guess that's not really an answer, but it's something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, that's really, it makes a lot of sense. And I could see how that kind of, yeah, vlogging aspect of like taking like clips throughout the day actually does kind of interrupt that, you know, day-to-day like awareness. So that makes a ton of sense. I guess the other question that I'd have there is like, I feel like a lot of your content, you talk about sort of engagement in the sense that, you know, when you create a video, it seems like you're very present for that video and that you bring a lot to that specific, you know, moment. But that a lot of creators out there oftentimes, whether it's through over editing or whether it's through kind of focusing too much on the hook, sort of, I don't know, get lost a little bit. And so I guess I'd love from your perspective, like for you to talk a little bit more about that, and whether it relates to this theme of presence or not. I guess just that piece around engagement and how you think about engagement.
Yeah, that's a great question. Like, I think I kind of categorize, first of all, I think it is fully dependent on the creator and their own preference and their own workflow and the type of content that they want to create, because, you know, you could put out really highly produced, really amazing cinematic footage, or you could do what I do, which is just like talk and then post. But I think it's being aware and figuring out what part of the process you like and what part of the process you don't like. So for me, the part that stresses me out the most is figuring out what to create and then maybe scripting it and trying to manipulate the words in a way that makes more sense. That part, because I love writing, but I'm a very slow writer. So that part is something I needed to eliminate out of my workflow. And so thinking about it in 3 categories, whether you like the preparation aspect, so if that's your creative outlet, or if you like the filming, like if you like to intentionally go out and film everything, or if you like the post process, the editing and things like that, figuring out which one of those you enjoy the most and where you put most of your effort, and then kind of eliminating all of the extra barriers that you put onto your own content. So for me, I prefer to capture everything in the video itself, like on a whim in like 20 minutes max. And then I actually, believe it or not, I know I say in a lot of my content that I don't like editing. And I don't like super professional editing, but I do enjoy the process of going back, watching my entire video and seeing how I can frame things to make more sense. What things can I take out, or what sort of pieces of context should I add, and things like that. So I like painting the picture after I've captured everything on film.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I feel like that 3-part framework of like preparation, filming, and editing is probably very helpful for a lot of creators to kind of then think about where the elements of friction in my own process or the barriers to posting content. I feel like that helps break it down and make it digestible. Can you tell me a little bit about how you kind of came up with this process? And on this podcast, we like to talk a lot about the early days of people who, when they were just kind of starting out, like that mindset. And so I guess, maybe take me back to the early days when you first started posting. Where was your head at? And then kind of how did that evolve into the process as it exists today?
Totally. So I would say it's interesting. I would say actually a lot of the process of me figuring out these processes for myself is captured on my account because I like express them as I come up with them. But the real, I think, breakthroughs for me happened when I started posting for myself, if that makes sense. So in my background, I used to create content for myself on YouTube back when I was like 12 years old. But I never really created a personal brand for myself under my name. That didn't mean I wasn't obsessed with making content. I would just make it for organizations, brands, things like that. And so I kind of understood all of the strategies, but I didn't understand the workflow behind it as an actual creator myself. So in my capturing of my breakthroughs and me learning my own process, a lot of that is of the reflection of me as a creator now, instead of me as like the back end, like strategy person.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess like when you first started creating content for yourself, for your personal brand, was that content aimed at other creators? Was it really just kind of you documenting takeaways as you had them? Or like day one, when you first started posting, what were your goals for your account at that point?
That's a great question, because I don't think I fully knew what my goal was. which I think is totally okay because it totally developed as I went. But it's funny because I didn't actually want to post like social media strategy content at the beginning. I wanted to more so document my own journey in building a business and in kind of taking a gap year and things like that. So I kind of wanted it to be more about my own journey. And then I guess as I was doing that, I learned a lot about social media strategy for myself and my own workflow. And that sort of translated into me explaining that and explaining my growth as I went. So I guess it wasn't fully intentional, but I knew deep down that the social media strategy types of videos or that those topics are the things that I'm most interested in anyway, and they're the things that I think about all the time. So I knew it was kind of inevitable that I would transfer to that at some point in my content.
That makes a lot of sense. And I guess related to that, so there's a lot out there by a lot of other sort of, I don't know, social media advice that talks a lot about being, about finding your niche. And so, you know, if somebody were to label you as a social media strategy niche creator, I guess what would your response be to that?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Because so my whole kind of strategy is becoming the niche, right? And I'd say you could argue that a lot of my content and a lot of my audience is about social media strategy, and people are interested in my content for that reason. But I see it more as it through this mindset of my social media strategy videos. They are there to help people, and they are there to also attract people towards my business and kind of the work that I do. But truthfully, what it's doing for me and my personal brand, it is that it is attracting the type of audience that is more likely to resonate with me as a person, simply because I am interested in these things. Because the kinds of topics that I talk about, I couldn't talk about with all of my friends in real life, because some of them are probably very disinterested in social media in general. And so me sharing my raw thoughts and my raw ideas out there and having that attract people is attracting a community that is truly centered around my interests. And that's how I kind of envision the social media strategy videos in the big picture, because as I talk about other things too, such as like business or productivity or growth or manifesting or anything like that, I'm also attracting an audience that is more likely to resonate with me as a person.
That makes a lot of sense. And can you talk to about how that relates to your business as it exists today, and maybe where you hope that it will go in the future?
Yeah, so my business today, I do social media consulting for personal brands and for companies on their TikTok. So it does attract the audience that is looking for that kind of help.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess related to that, do you see any other kind of avenues or jumping off points? I know you've talked before about, how Mr. Beast built his empire of chocolate brands. I mean, I guess, do you see that in your future? Do you ever see yourself launching an e-com brand? Or I imagine there are a lot of different ways that you could take this. And it's okay if the answer is you don't know yet or you're not comfortable sharing, but I'd be curious if beyond social media consulting or the creation of digital products, if there's any other sort of potential avenues that you see now that you've built a personal brand, like where you could take it from here.
Yes, absolutely. I have always said that I am a creator first, business second. So I think there's different strategies for different people based on their priorities. And although I did use the business that already existed as an excuse for me to get onto social media for myself and for me to get past that barrier, I ultimately start as a creator, as somebody who just wants to create videos, post them on the internet, build a community, share messages, have a platform, things like that. So I absolutely see that as my priority in my growth, is to continue building that platform. And the kind of my goal with it, in the long run, is to be able to build my platform past my business, if that makes sense. It's not a platform I only created to grow my business. I'd say it's the opposite. And I think that informs a lot of my strategies too, is that I don't want to be like relying on certain topics or things like that to keep this sustainable. And I definitely want to be able to take it with me anywhere I go, whether that's traveling, whether that's back to school, whether that's a new business in the future, things like that.
Yeah, no, that I like that point. The creator first, business second aspect to it. And in terms of building that platform and maybe kind of just diving more into the monetization side, do you think that there are any sort of monetization strategies that creators often miss? Like, you know, I think a lot of the content focuses on, for instance, like brand deals or, but I'd be curious, you know, from your perspective, do you feel like there are overlooked revenue streams that creators, especially ones that are just starting out, don't typically think of?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of the revenue stream that you do choose to go for kind of depends on your outlook on yourself as a creator versus a business. But definitely, I guess, like, you can do kind of what I do, which is have like coaching in the background or consulting in the background or some sort of access to your education or your knowledge. I think any creator technically could be helping businesses and other aspiring creators help as someone that's already succeeded on a platform. But I'd also say past the brand deals, I think creators should always be thinking about building their own brand or their own business behind their brand. I know I've thought about it. While I look forward to working with brands in the future, I definitely do see myself building my own brand with my own physical products, or like consumable products, I guess, in the future as well.
Awesome. No, that's really exciting to hear. Yeah, and I guess you know, one thing that you put it like right in your handle, like future millionaire. Can you talk a little bit more about like the path to get there, and maybe we can get into the Project 129 aspect too, but maybe just kind of, you know, when you first put that out there, what was the intention, and how are you you know, thinking about kind of getting to that goal?
Totally. So the future millionaire in my name it wasn't like a strategic thing at first. It was actually because I had just posted a couple videos that gained traction at the beginning of my like platform growth, where I was talking about being in the room with millionaires and things I was learning as I was growing my own business. And so through that topic, I sort of came up with like, oh, I am a future millionaire. And I really stuck with it for a couple reasons. I'd say one, it is very motivating for me. And at this point, I've said it so many times that I truly, truly believe it. And I truly think believing it not only helps me achieve it, but also inspires other people to realize that they can believe that for themselves. And then second of all, strategically, for social media strategy, it's great because it's catchy, it's memorable, and it gets people invested in my growth. And so that's kind of always been my goal, is you can create the best content ever. You can like work super hard on creating the best video ever and have it go viral. That's great. But will they continue to watch you past that one video is up to the way you create that video, right? If it's just the most beautiful video ever, and then that's why people follow you, then they're going to expect other beautiful videos from now on. And that's what's going to keep your brand going. for me, if I can get people to follow based on this story that I'm truly living out in my life, then my job becomes sharing my story and living my life.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's such a cool approach to take, especially like as somebody who's like at kind of the college age, or as a college student. I mean, what would be your advice to other like college age students in terms of sort of being able to, whether it's break out of the 9 to 5 or kind of just envision a new new pathways for themselves when it comes to having a quote unquote profession? What would be, I guess, the number one piece of advice that you would give somebody who's kind of at that stage?
Yeah, I would say, at least from my experience, the thing that kind of gave me the guts or the audacity to explore different paths was being exposed to other people who were doing the same thing. Like, as I mentioned before, I created content when I was really young, and then I kind of stopped because there was pretty much no one at my school or in my hometown that I could talk to about it. And, even at school, at college, I always thought, I have been thinking for years, oh my gosh, I don't want to start creating content, but I didn't know what I wanted to post, like what I wanted to be known for. I had no direction there. And I remember I posted like one random TikTok on my account, and someone from my school like sent it back to me and saw it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have no freedom to like explore this. Everyone's going to find me and judge me and all of that. But the second, summer break came and I ended up moving to San Francisco for the summer. It was like a new place. And I started meeting other people who understood the value of like personal branding and creating content. That's what unlocked this like confidence in me, where I was like, oh, I can actually do this. And I can actually do it well. I actually do understand what I'm doing. And that has definitely catapulted into what I do now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, I love that aspect of like finding your people, whether that's online or whether that's, in person, and just having that, cultivating that, because it can be such a unlock in terms of confidence. What things, I guess, when people are first starting to create content, do you see like creators often struggle with, or maybe, aspiring creators, like, what do you think is like the number one hangout for a lot of folks out there?
I would say everyone is overthinking everything. That would be my observation, just because, I went through the same thing for years. And then when I actually started creating content, I went through it again, where it's this idea that like the first couple videos you make will determine the brand that you have forever or what you're known for. And I think, at least on TikTok specifically, that fear comes from this like, little idea that maybe you'll go viral on your first post. And if you do, you're stuck in that topic or you're stuck wherever. And so I think that concept of whatever I post now is the determining factor forever holds a lot of people up, because they can never decide on what that is. And they can't envision, like, they don't exactly know yet what they want to be known for. And I would strongly urge anyone that is wanting to start creating content to see the beginning phases as purely experimental, because the way I think about it is, if you decide something and you don't even like creating that content, you're like, that's not even worth it at the end. So experimenting with all sorts of content styles, content topics, anything like that, and kind of letting go of this idea that it will actually determine the future of your success. Future Millionaire is my current branding. It won't be forever. And it didn't happen for a while. It took me a while to get to that.
Yeah. Now, and thanks for kind of sharing that, because I do think that it's easy to kind of compare yourself with other creators out there, and sort of make the maybe inaccurate assumption that it happened overnight for them, or like on their first post it took off and then that's what kind of catapulted them. So I think that sort of sharing that it takes some trial and error. And also, yeah, I love the aspect of your content where, you're able to be this multifaceted person while still, exploring and being seen as an expert in specific topics. I guess one other thing that I mentioned earlier, but would love to circle back on, is if you could talk a little bit more about Project 129 and the process of almost starting your own trend on TikTok.
Absolutely. So for those of you who don't know, Project 129 is a project that my friend and I started where our goal is to make $300,000 by July 31st. And we started it 129 days prior to July 31st with this kind of story of the fact that both of us are on gap years and we can't decide if we want to go back to school or not. And so this is a way to help us in that decision. In terms of it starting as a trend, honestly, that was not our intention at all. It was truthfully just a decision or like a project that we came up with on our own. And because we are both content creators, we thought to publicize it. And then immediately after I posted, like I created my announcement post about it, I got two friends of mine immediately reach out to me and be like, I'm joining. And I didn't even think about it as something people could join. But from there, it just kind of snowballed. I think everyone wanted to be in on it as just almost through an element of FOMO. But in terms of, after the initial boost of people joining, I realized, oh, wow, this really could be a trend. And in terms of strategies, if any of you guys are looking to start a trend or something like that, I would say, well, my analysis on Project 129 is that it was great. It was a great excuse for people to finally start chasing their dreams. It was a great opportunity for people to start chasing their dreams in the way that they have been thinking about it for years. And I know that feeling because I went through that feeling. And so having that sort of excuse not excuse, but like a reason for people to actually start really helped catapult it. And then another thing I think is really important is to emphasize the fact that it is starting as a trend. Right. So my most popular videos about Project 129 are about me talking about the fact that I didn't expect it to become a trend and that it did. Another way trends start really well is if other people are talking about it, because in my eyes, 1,000 views on somebody else's video talking about you as a person or a creator is much more valuable than 1,000 views that you can get on your own. Because 1,000 views that you get on your own are kind of more passive on the For You page. It's like, yes, 1,000 people have seen your face and heard you talk. But 1,000 views on a video talking about you, people are actively registering in their head, this is a person, this person is doing cool things, I should look out for this person. And from then on, whenever they see your videos, they are seeing it from an observational lens instead of a consumption lens. So once I saw a couple of people post about Project 129, I stitched one of those and talked about it from there. And I think that kind of created this illusion that turned into a genuine momentum for Project 129.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I love that aspect of having that the statement that you had just there of 1,000 views of somebody talking about you is sometimes a lot more powerful than even just a video that you create. And that there's that kind of observational versus like consumption lens. And I imagine too that it lends like an element of social proof. We had a guest who was on the podcast who referred to it as sphere hacking, where it's like essentially the idea that you're kind of tapping into other people's spheres and it, that can be a very powerful thing in terms of kind of like lending credibility to your work and your content.
Totally. I've heard a different name for that from like a class that I took at Duke for social media marketing, but my professor called it traffic leaking.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, I mean, can you talk a little bit more too about, you set these public goals that I think really resonate with people, because I think that there's an element of, I don't know, I mean, I'd be curious your perspective. My perspective is that part of why I like your content is there's this element of, relatability and also like vulnerability that I think that I really respond to, and that I have a lot of admiration for people who set goals for themselves, and also just kind of share the pathway to get there. I guess for you, like in terms of, your mental health, like I imagine that we all have goals that we set for ourselves. A lot of us set them more privately. And so it makes it so that, if we don't achieve those goals, we, don't have to have that sort of public accountability. And so I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts just on the mental aspect of public goal setting, when it makes sense and when you think that there are times, maybe it makes less sense to do.
Totally. That's a wonderful question because I'd say I've experienced like both sides of like, oh my gosh, it's a great idea to set goals publicly, but it's also kind of overwhelming. I'd say maybe one approach or mindset that I have that helps me in setting goals publicly is I believe very strongly in my audience to understand that nobody is perfect, and just because I say something doesn't mean I will do it or accomplish it. But I have also felt like I wouldn't say it's ever a pressure from my audience or ever like an accountability aspect that stresses me out. But I will say like setting such big goals, such as $300,000 in 129 days or future millionaire in 2023, has sort of affected my ability to see my own business super clearly, because with those goals, yes, I think bigger and I think faster, but that can also harm the foundation that I am building, because I think that's also really important. So I've definitely been going through this struggle of balance of like, how much do I really want to prioritize making money fast at this very second and building a strong foundation and prioritizing maybe my content and my content creation, because I do see the potential in like just long-term not really having a business and just having a personal brand and building that up really well in the way that Mr. Beast did. He didn't start his Mr. Beast burgers and companies and stuff for a while. So yeah, there's definitely a balance. But another thing I'll add is that like, because I set these goals and I'm willing to be transparent in them in terms of what I'm struggling to go through, I think that allows for a lot more leeway of like, whenever like, okay, sorry. So let's say I was saying like future millionaire, my content isn't, this is how I'm going to make $1 million and then step by step how to do it, because the fact is I don't know how and I'm figuring it out. And so I think that perspective of me as a student helps me think of my content and with less pressure of the actual end goal.
Yeah, no, it seems like your followers they're there for the journey of it, and the learnings is the big piece, and the goals that you set for yourself are more like helpful in the sense that it helps you think big, but it's the path to get there that's the more interesting part, as opposed to the kind of get rich quick schemes of like, totally. I paid $1 million, here's how to do it, that kind of
totally. And another thing I'll add is like, I intentionally the way I think about my transparency and my my struggles and sharing them is with this sense of delusion, almost not delusion, but just thinking big of, if I can share these struggles right now and just put them out into the universe, then 3 years down the line, I can make some really cool transformation videos of my growth. And I think that's the important part. There's a creator named Alex Hormozy who talks about, he built very successful businesses, and his goal, I think, is probably to build $1 billion business or something. And he talks about how his idols, Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, all these big time people, how he wishes they documented their journey. So he's doing it for the rest of us. I think of myself as like a tier under Alex, right? He's probably like 10, 15 years ahead of me. I wish he documented his journey to where he got to today. So that's what I'm doing for the rest of us, 10, 15 years under him. And so that's how I think about it, is like, I'm okay sharing beliefs, even if maybe they're not fully correct, because I do see the transformation happening in the future.
Yeah, no, I like that. And thank you for starting early for the rest of us. I guess one other question that I had for you is really more around sort of platforms and a lot of creators kind of, focus on one platform. Other ones, think it's really important to diversify across platforms. It seems like you're primarily on TikTok, from what I understand, but would be curious to hear kind of how you think about whether it's important for creators to diversify, or whether, you really think that there's value in leaning into a specific platform. And yeah, kind of how you think about that as a part of your strategy.
Absolutely. I would say it depends on what phase or season you are in as a creator. In terms of like long-term legitimacy and just truly being everywhere, I think it is important to eventually expand to multiple platforms. But at the beginning of my content creation journey, one of the best things I did was decide to focus just on TikTok. I remember when I first started creating super consistently, I was so overwhelmed with a lot of the information out there about content repurposing and things like that. So I remember being like, okay, so I have to make TikToks and then I can like repost those onto Instagram. But Instagram, I need to make like prettier reels. And then, I really want to start a podcast. So maybe I should do that and then just record it and then put it on YouTube and then split that up and then make that my short form. So I was like very overwhelmed by all of these different ideas of how to do things most efficiently. When at the beginning, I think what's more important than being efficient and being everywhere all at once is actually knowing what you're putting out and understanding like the brand that you're creating for yourself, defining the journey that you're on, and showing up in a really memorable way. So I remember after all of that overwhelm, I wrote down on a piece of paper, okay, for the next 30 days, I'm only allowed to post on TikTok. And that freed me up because it allowed me to just explore and experiment on what I actually wanted to talk about, how I wanted to show up. And also the friction of this idea, like, I could have probably reposted onto Instagram while I was posting on TikTok. That would have been fine. But it's this idea of, okay, I have to post 2 or 3 times on TikTok today. And then once I post, I have to download it and put it onto Instagram. It's another added pressure that you don't want to have when you're first starting and you're first getting used to content creation. So I would strongly recommend, if you're starting, to just focus on one platform, do it well, figure it out and figure out your own voice. And then from there, you'll have a lot more clarity on to how you can show up on other platforms.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's great advice for people starting out and kind of bringing it full circle to where we started. I guess maybe kind of wrapping things up, I would be curious to hear, number one, if you have any kind of parting wisdom for people who are in that kind of seed of just beginning on their journey. And then 2, if there's anything on, the horizon that you want to plug.
Sure. So in terms of parting wisdom, I would say that everyone should trust their own brains a little bit more. There's a lot of information out there on how to grow, all of that. A lot of people like teaching you like scripting and things like that. I would trust you and your own creativity and your own ideas more, and really tap into content creation as an art form as opposed to a strategic way to game some sort of system and get views onto your videos. Once you do that, it'll free you up from the like I guess, guidelines and boundaries that are holding you back, because most likely what's holding you back isn't the fact that you don't have enough time, or that you're like, I don't even know, that like it's not the fact that you don't have time, it's the limiting beliefs that you're putting on yourself.
Yeah, I love that. That's really good advice. And then would love to, I know you're very public about sharing your goals, but would be curious to hear if there's anything specifically that you want our listeners to pay attention to or keep an eye out in terms of your content or what's on the horizon.
Yeah, totally. So I currently just launched a program called the Personal Brand Incubator. And my goal with this program in the long run, I guess, is to create a space for people to really figure out their voice, their own workflow, define their own strategies, like understand the principles of personal branding and content and algorithms and things like that, so that they can really, again, think super creatively for themselves. So that is a program that I am currently working on. And also, first time even like putting this out into the world, but as I was saying before, I do really want to start a podcast. And now that it has been like 6 months since I focused just on TikTok, I will say to look out for a podcast in the future.
Exciting. That's awesome. Well, you heard it here first. That's great. Well, Katie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. I know it's going to be really valuable to our creators who are listening, or folks who maybe are just getting started on their content creation journey. So yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
Of course, and thank you so much for having me on, Evelyn.